Hello, Alex here, and in this video I want to talk about my photographic goals for 2023 and how I got on with those, talk about some new gear purchases, and then set myself some goals for 2024 just to push myself as a photographer. Let's get into it. Like I've said before, I like to set myself annual, quite broad goals for my photography, maybe specific in terms of development and stuff, but broad in terms of techniques and what I do, because it helps me broaden the scope of what I do and identify and tackle weaknesses or perceived weaknesses in my photography without necessarily going into the nitty-gritty of I need to photograph this bridge this year. That's not helpful, but try and find a technique or a style of something that I don't do enough, that I would like to do more, and then push myself to do that. In last year's video, I set myself two main goals for the year because I thought they would be relatively achievable. The first was to develop E6 film at home, which I did. E6 as a process is a lot more temperature sensitive and very labor intensive compared to C41, especially when using a 6-bath kit. But I did it. I developed 35mm 120 and 4x5 slides, normally, pushed, cross-processed, and push cross-processed, all through a Bellini 6-bath kit throughout the course of the summer after building up a number of rolls and sheets over the course of about 5 months. I'm not sure long term if I would continue doing this, maybe for the 4x5 stuff or very special rolls or maybe extreme pushes, but for general E6, I'll probably just go to the bigger picture and dev my film because they are, aside from being our only E6 lab, an absolutely excellent lab, and I would trust them to handle my film well, and the cost savings with E6 right here, right now in this part of the world aren't as good as they are with C41, so it's not as easy to justify. Regardless, I did it, and I did it well, and that's the important part. The second was to get back into macro photography, which I fell in love with when I was younger, and that's kind of fallen by the wayside in recent years. For various reasons, this didn't work out. I fell out of love with medium format photography, and the secret goal of getting my holy grail medium format camera, which is very optimized for macro photography, just didn't really work until the end of the year. And I didn't really feel like forcing myself too hard to do a bit more of it with other cameras. I did quite a bit of close-up work and a bit of macro with the Wista and the Canon, but in my mind there's a clear distinction between close-ups and macro beyond the technical definition based on reproduction ratio and magnification, and yeah, it just didn't really work out. So overall, I'm calling it like a 1.5 out of 2 this year. It's not the end of the world. I would rather not force it and not achieve the goal that I set myself in a YouTube video than force it for the sake of it and just kind of burn myself out on photography, basically. If you haven't seen my video on the long break that I took from medium format photography, the short version is that I just completely fell into a rut when it came to medium format and couldn't figure out what I wanted to do that would help me take advantage of the high resolution of the film and also justify owning a medium format camera when I have 35 for high volume shooting and low stakes experimentation, and the large format camera for really high quality, precise, highly controlled photography. In the end, I decided not to compromise, and I went for 2 different cameras that serve 2 very different purposes within the sphere of 120 within my mind. Aside from that, I have bought a new flash, and I do want to talk about that for a little bit and shine some light on it, pun intended, because a few people have asked me questions about it since seeing me using it, and I figure it might be nice to address them, and it's probably not going to get its own video. The first bit of kit I want to talk about is my first ever TLR, a yashica-mat 124G. This thing is a blast. It's pretty small and light, much smaller than the Mamiya TLR up there, that thing's broken, or the Canon UF1 with like a 50 or a 28 attached to it. It shoots 120 or 220 film, which is really nice for me. It has a light meter built in, which is really accurate, which is great. It's pretty simple to use. It has a normal shutter button, unlike a raw light cord, which was one of the big factors in me deciding to get this camera over a raw light cord. And it was kind of serendipitous. Someone I knew was selling his around the time I was thinking about getting one, so I just went for it because it's easier to fork out the money when you know the person and you know it's been taken care of. I did change out the focusing screen, which I'll talk about soon, because the stock focusing screen is pretty bad. It's really dim and it lacks clarity, but I'll talk more about that in that video. The only other thing I want to say about this is that it has been fantastic for portraiture and as a general carry around 120 camera, because when you approach someone to take their portrait with this thing, it's an old-timey camera. I said this in the 120 glut video, but everyone recognizes this as an old camera, kind of regardless of their age. Everyone knows it's not a new modern camera, even if they don't know what a TLR is. People seem to be just much more amenable to having their portrait taken, which is something I've really enjoyed doing with this camera. Also, it's just something new to me. I've used like 6x6 SLRs before, never a TLR, and there are some slight differences that change the overall experience. The second thing I want to talk about is my new flash, the METS 40 MZ2 or MZ2. This is a nice big hammerhead flash and it's really powerful, which is something I wanted because I have small on-camera flashes, but this thing is much stronger. You can use it left side, right side, blah, 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 full manual mode, but it has a ton of options, including zooming and bouncing and turning the head around and whatnot. And you can even take the head off if you get an SCA adapter and put it directly on your camera. I haven't found the correct one yet, but I do want to do that, as comically large as it will be. The main reason I wanted this flash is because it has a thyristor for a dumb auto mode, which is good enough for negative film, but it's digital safe. I read online that this thing was good, and I tested it with an oscilloscope, and it's like 4.75, 4.8 volts of a trigger voltage, as opposed to the, 30 volts up to 680 volts that you'll see with some older flashes that would absolutely fry any camera that has electronics in it, like the X-Pan. And I have been using this with the X-Pan as well as with the yashica-mat, and it's been really fun, and it kind of gets people's attention on the photo walks, which is a nice side benefit, I guess. The fact that it's digital safe and I can use it with the electronic X-Pan is a huge thing, and I want to play around with this more for kind of creative effect. We'll see how that goes down the line. The third and final piece of gear I want to talk about in this video is the Rolleiflex SL66, a 6x6 medium format SLR camera designed by Rollei, which is really optimized for landscape and macro photography, which is exactly what I want to use this camera for, in addition to the 124G for portraits and the like. Of course, you can use this for portraits as well. The main features that attracted me to this camera, to keep it brief in this video, are the ability to tilt the front standard up and down, if you could call it a front standard, for depth of field control, for positive and negative tilt, and also the fact that the lens mount on the body is a standard base 6 mount, meaning most of the lenses can be reversed for macro photography without needing extension tubes or anything like that. You can just take the lens off, turn it around, reattach it, and boom, you've got a macro lens. That is fantastic for me, and it's one of the things that really attracted me to this camera. I got my kit with multiple lenses and accessories for a fantastic price, and it did have some issues, some of which I was able to resolve myself, others that I haven't been able to. So I will be sending it off for a service in the next couple of months. But this is it. This is my holy grail camera. I've wanted one for like a year and a half at this stage, and I finally have one. I'm so happy. It feels so nice to use. So for 2024, I'm going to carry over that macro photography goal, because once the Rolleiflex is perfectly serviced and up to scratch, I will be doing a lot more macro photography with that thing. Trust me. And I should also do a little bit more with the Canon. I've got a +2 filter for the 55 now, and I can do maybe not true macro, but a bit of good photography, and it's got a TTL meter, so that will help there. The two new goals that I'm setting for 2024 are, first, to take more portraits of strangers on film. I've been practicing a lot at our photo walks, in Dublin, in Cork, in Nottingham at Analog Spotlight, but it's very different taking film portraits of film photographers who know how long it takes to focus and meter and everything versus complete strangers. I mentioned that the 124G is great for that because people recognize this as not a threat, basically, and a lot of strangers are very okay having their picture taken with that camera, in my experience. And I want to push myself to do that a lot more with complete strangers, maybe by using film with better latitude and just pre-metering, so I just need to focus and compose and get the shot. It's something I want to just push myself to do because I'm a bit more socially awkward than I try to let on in these videos, I want to push myself just to be a bit more outgoing and engage with people. I did quite a bit of this in Nottingham because I was only there for 2 days, might as well make the most of it. But I think it's worth setting it as a challenge for myself for the year, just to kind of broaden what I'm able and willing to do as a photographer. The other thing I want to push myself to do is hike a bit more with the 4x5. I feel like with the whole punishing myself for not doing enough macro photography thing, I need a goal that's just try something that I don't do enough of. So landscape photography, hiking, and going out with the 4x5 is something I don't do a lot of, and I have a much better tripod setup now that I can travel with a lot more easily. So that's what I'll do. Whether it's Ticknock and Glendalough, or going up north again with friends, or even just the trip down to see Kieran, which probably hasn't happened by the time this video goes live. We are going to do that. It'll just be fun to get out and do some really slow-paced, low-volume photography. And yeah, I think I'll really enjoy doing that. If you also like setting goals for yourself for your photography, let me know in the comments down below or send me an Instagram DM or an email. I'm always curious to hear what other people are getting up to grow their skill sets and help them grow as artists. I'll be back very soon with the 3-year anniversary video for this channel because it's been about 3 years since I've kind of brought it back from the dead. But that's all I have to say for this video, so stay safe and bye-bye for now. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at yashica-mat for new pictures every day. If you liked this video and enjoy what I do on the channel, please consider subscribing or checking out my Patreon where the tiers start at just €1 per month.